Hello, everyone. This is Jimmy Cultist, back again with another logic video, and today we're going to be covering how to pick up a block or an object. It doesn't have to be a block, it could be anything, but it's how to pick up an object in third person and be able to set it back down again. So let's get right down to business. First things first is you're going to want to stamp out a blue block. I'll use grid snap and stamp shape to stamp it out. Reduce the detail, which you can find in tools. Adjust detail, and just press R2 till it's reduced. This block you are going to make invisible, and then you are going to group it with the asset you want to be picked up, which in this case is a crate. The crate must be non-collidable, if I can get hold of it. Make it non-collidable, and don't label it anything in particular. And once you've grouped it with the block, label that group object and label it movable. Then put a chip, a microchip, which you can find in here, onto the block. Press L1 and X to stamp it out in the proper position, which is right here. I've named it crate. I'm not sure if that's actually how you spell crate, but it doesn't really matter too much. Inside, I want you to put a gyroscope, which you can find in movers and output, right over here. Set the gyroscope to 100% strength and 100% overall dampening. 180 speed will do nicely. Next, I want you to stamp out a chip, which we are going to call tags. Ignore all this other stuff for now. First, stamp out a tag. Make sure that it's in this position. If you want to get a look inside, just press L1 and square, and while it's open, you can move this little dot around to wherever you want, but make sure it's mostly in the middle. And we're going to call this, we're going to retitle it by pressing X right here to set object down, or set down object, I should say. Set down object, make sure it's, however you want it to be. Then you're going to copy it out and make another chip called, another tag called pick up object. And it's going to be in the same position, as you can see. Now that that's done, I want you to stamp out a selector, connect set down object to A input, and pick up object to B input. Next, stamp out a zone. You can find zones in sensors and input. Set it to detect tag. This tag will be called can pick up, and that's all you really need to know about that. I will tell you that this interacts with a tag within the puppet I've got over here. There's this piece of logic called pick up logic, and I've connected the triangle output from this controller, which you can open with L1 and square, to a node which is connected to can pick up as a tag. And once it detects this zone, it will send out an output beginning the process, which I'll get to in a little bit. There's still a few more things we have to do. Next, I want you to take the B output from our little selector and connect it to the power of setDown object. This means that you will only be able to access this tag once you've entered the second phase, which is basically carrying the object. B represents the second phase. I also want you to take A and put it in the power of pickup object. So basically, you will not be able to initiate the pickup sequence unless A is triggered. So we won't have the thing where we're picking it up and setting it down over and over again. It'll stop the loop. I'll explain some other things that help prevent that in a moment. I also want you to take A and connect it to the power of this, so that you won't get the ability to pick up things. Basically, the prompt will not appear unless you're on A. Like once the block is set down, then you can do this, because A represents the set down state. Then take B and connect it to a chip, which we're going to call carrying, and this is going to be the carrying state, essentially. In here, we're going to have a teleporter set to follow a tag called object mount, which I have put inside the puppet. In here, I think. No, wait a minute. It's not inside there. Oh, wait a minute, I forgot. I put the object mount on the chest here. And I'll explain how I did that. I took this block, copied it, scoped into the puppet with L1 and X. I'll show you how to do this. I might as well do it in detail. First, L1 and R2 to copy. Then L1 and circle to scope out. With it still in hand, holding R2, then press L1 and X to scope into the puppet's group. And the puppet's chest is actually a group as well, because I've added suspenders. But basically, if it's not a group, just click X on the two of them and press this to make them a group. However, it is a group, so instead we're going to scope in with L1 and X. And I put the cube directly in the center. And essentially, this is only to act as a mount for logic. Once the cube is inside, scope outside the group, like this, and put a tag on there. Make sure you're only in this blue ring area, though. Don't do it outside, otherwise it won't work properly. Put the chip right here on the block like so, and put the object mount tag right here. Now I've moved the distance so that it's about this far from his chest. Hopefully that won't interfere with anything. And since I've tested it, it won't. But, you know, your position may be slightly different. Like if you wanted him to carry a jar on his head, you'd want it to be up here. But, yeah, let's get down to business. This thing follows that thing right there, that tag. It's also set to match angles so that the block will always be facing the right direction when you pick it up. Now if you pick it up from the other side, it's going to quickly whoosh around, but I don't think that's a big deal, you know, as long as it's facing the right direction. I also have this little, let's go ahead and turn on the power just so we can see this in action. I have this little action recorder, which I have set to keyframe mode, and all it does is I scope into the group and make our sculpture, the blue part, non-collidable. Might as well press triangle on that part, because we don't really need that non-collidable. And that's all it does, really, is it makes this block non-collidable so it won't interfere with the puppet's collision in any way. Otherwise you might have like a weird effect where it's constantly pushing the puppet away. I've also made sure that the power is turned on and that it's set to loop, so make sure you do that as well. And for our final piece of logic inside the block, we have can't carry as a tag. It's right here, but actually it could be anywhere. I think I'll put it in the center though, just so it looks nice. But basically inside the puppet we have a active zone that once it's going, it'll make it so that you can't carry the block. And you may wonder, why would I want that? It doesn't make any sense, really. Well, the whole purpose of it is to essentially just make sure that if you're carrying a block, you can't pick up or carry another one. And this action recorder that I've got here, set to keyframe mode, just turns off the tags so that you can't interact with a block if you're carrying another one. I've also got this trigger zone set to detect label, both invisible and non-collidable, and it detects objects. And since this is an object, it ordinarily would shut itself off, but it's set to detect 2, so that means if there's 2 blocks present, this thing won't work. And it's also set to not detect at the bottom, so you could set this block on top of another block because it's slightly up, but the block below would not be interactable. That way you can stack them. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. There's also a thing in here I should mention. The no collide action recorder also turns off the can't carry tag, which I will explain in a moment what this is all about. Anyway, now that that's all done with, we're going to go back in here, and as you can see, triangle prompt goes to this node, and this thing called can't pick up, which leads to a node with a NOT gate stuck in the power of the node. And the node is connected to a timeline set to play once, which I have labeled pick up. In here I have a switch which connects to the NOT gate and prevents playback from happening. I also have a basic animation, which I will demonstrate. These keyframes are set to linear blend. It's basically just him picking it up. And the final pose is going to be his basic carry position when he's holding the block. So keep that in mind. We're going to want to dupe that out later. I also have the action recorder set to keyframe mode and set to loop. I've stretched the duration with R2, which is quite easy to do. And basically all it does is it shuts off the puppet's parameter, or the puppet's interface, I should say. Now the interface is not normally inside a chip like this. This is just something I tend to do. You could actually go directly and shut it off right here by pressing X while in keyframe mode. I've also shut off the procedural animations. This switch is connected to a node, and the node is connected to the parameters, the procedural animations of this puppet, which you can access by pressing L1 and square to open this little menu. There they are right down there, procedural walk and procedural animation. As you can see, the node is connected. So all that's doing is turning off the procedural animations. So he won't move and his feet will not collide with the ground, is mainly what this action recorder inside the timeline does. And next I have this little zone set to detect a tag called Pick Up Object. You may recognize Pick Up Object as this little baby right here that I showed you earlier. It connects to B. So essentially when this zone finds this tag will automatically put out an output to B, meaning that we will begin carrying the object and the teleporter will be active and the non-collision also. And that, of course, connects the power to this timeline, because we want, we want the carrying method for the character to also be active in the state. Once this is triggered, we want him to go to the carry state. Inside the carry state, I've put a keyframe which is constantly powered on. And this is just a basic pose that I showed you earlier, which we, could easily duplicate from the timeline. And you probably, you know, during the testing phase of this, you just want this stuff, if you just wanted to test this, you could dupe out the pose, leave it on, and then add power to the object mount just to get the position right. I've already tested it, so I know the position is right, but just keep that in mind if you're having difficulty getting it properly adjusted. Next, I've got parameters, and all that parameters does is go in here to poses. Inside this chip, these are basically the two running parameters. There's the normal running pose where he's like this, which is constantly, you know, the node is on power, so it'll be fine. However, when parameters kicks in, I shut off that node and turn on this other one, which is normally powered down. This is how you do that. Just L1 and square, open it up, and add power, and turn off power on that one. Now the only difference between these running poses and that one is this running pose, he's like kind of facing upward, as if he's carrying the block. I've also gone into his, you know, running animations. I've turned down almost everything that makes him sway, and I've turned down the arm vigor and the arm flail so that he's more stationary when carrying the crate, as you would be. You wouldn't be flailing all over the place with a big crate in your arms. But basically, that's all parameters does, is switch between these two states of animation when he's running. What else do we have here? Oh, we also have this, a zone set to detect a tag called can't carry, and it's set to in scene, so basically all over the scene, this little baby will be triggered. However, the block that you're carrying will already have its no collide turning this off, so you don't have to worry about the one you're carrying. This just means all the other ones around the level will not be interactable, and you won't have, like, you know, crates zipping all over the place and ending up in your hands or whatever. Although that could be fun depending on what game you're making. Anyway, next we've got this other trigger zone, and it's set to detect an object, which, if you recall, all of our crates are labeled as objects, and it detects both uncollidable and invisible. But basically, this is just a little check. It's like, make sure there's a crate here, you know. If there's a crate here, if there's a crate that's too high, like, say, one that's above your sight line, you will not be able to pick that one up, because the power goes into this thing called block. And basically what that does is it blocks your ability to set the crate down. You know, if it's too high, you can't set it down. Like, say there's a crate way high up here, you're not going to set it down in the middle somehow and knock them all over. So that's basically what that does. It just shuts off the ability to set the crate down. And I'm going to go ahead and show how we do the setting down. Another thing I'd like to mention is that A output from the selector is always connected to this NOT gate, so that basically you will only be able to access this logic when A is active. Once you're in the carry state, you won't be able to pick things up anymore. But anyway, going back to our previous node, which is basically the triangle prompt from the controller sensor, I have duplicated it and turned off the power. Now, why have I duplicated that node? Well, basically, when this thing is active, parameters will turn that on. Like so. So basically, when you're carrying, only when you're carrying, will you have the option to set it down again. And I just connected it to a node with a NOT gate stuck in the power, and it's basically just a duplicated version of the pick up feature. The only difference is inside we have reversed the animation so that your starting animation is actually the pose of carrying, and the set down animation is also slightly different because I kind of want him to drop the crate. That way you can stack them, as opposed to when you pick them up you lean down to do so. And I have a new zone labeled Set Down Object, which, if you recall, this little tag was called Set Down Object, and it is only active when you're in the carry state, so this will allow you to set it down again. I've also got the action recorder, which prevents your movement and your procedural animations, just like in this one, and you could basically just press L1 and R2 to duplicate it and put it right here, because it does the same thing, essentially. I've also taken the detected output and connected it right to A, so we'll be back to square one once we've set down the object, as it should be. I've also taken the zone and connected it to the NOT gate, of course, but I've also connected it to the previous zone so that there is no possible, way that we could have an overlapping animation or pick up the other one by accident. Not until the duration of setting it down is absolutely complete. So, let's go ahead and test it. Since we've gone over all the logic, it would be, weird if we didn't test it to see if it all worked correctly. I also am going to duplicate this with L1 and R2 just to make sure everything is working properly according to my, triangle. And we set it down. I think they're too close to each other, that's probably what it is. Kind of a nice tune. Anyway, that's the system in a nutshell. You'll notice that how big you make can pick up will make it easier or harder to pick up the crate from a distance. Like, I've made it very close to where the crate actually is, so it'll be harder for you to pick them both up at once, which is still possible with this system. I've just made it extremely unlikely. So that glitch may occur, but it's going to be less likely, and even if you do it, there's probably still ways that, you can continue the game and everything. But, yeah, basically the size of this zone does matter in proportion to where you put this particular tag. Anyway, hopefully you found this helpful and it will come in handy in some way for your own projects.
Thanks for watching. If you have any thoughts, leave a comment, and if you enjoyed the video, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you don't miss future videos. That's all for now. Goodbye.